Good morning.
Good morning.
It's great to be back and to see so many beautiful, familiar faces. I'm going to give a special thanks first to Michael for the great music, and then to the blessed hands that did the decorations. It was really nice to sit there and just kind of look at the tree and settle in. So we're going to start today with a meditation for busy people. So I'm going to invite you to just sit and put your feet on the floor. If you've got something in your lap, maybe you want to put it to one side. It's a busy time of the year. And this is going to be a meditation to my wonderful body. Meditation of gratitude for my body. Too many of us spend way too much time running around. We become human doings this time of the year rather than human beings. Today I'm asking you to give thanks for your body, to praise it, to celebrate it, to know that it is a gift. So today I give thanks for my wonderful heart, which beats faithfully and strong, and from which I can send forth loving energy. Today I give thanks for my lungs, which allow me to breathe the breath of life. I inhale and exhale almost without thinking, and yet this very energy keeps me alive. I give thanks for the wonderful organs of my body, the eyes that let me see, the ears that let me hear, the mouth that lets me eat but also allows me to say words of love and comfort. I give thanks for my hands, for they truly are the hands of the divine. With those hands I can love, I can hug, I can pat someone on the back. I give thanks for my skeleton. I give thanks for my bones. It allows me to stand and walk and be in the world. I give thanks for all of my senses, for all parts of my body, and I most especially give thanks for my brain, the control center of my life. I give thanks that it is able to think, to reason, to comprehend. So I invite you today to live in gratitude for your body. In this busy, busy time of the year, take the time to thank it. And at the end of a busy day, when you're settled in for the evening, celebrate it. Thank it for getting you through the day. And on another level, give thanks for the realization that you are more than your body. That you are connected to the divine. That you are a manifestation of the energy of the universe. And so it is. Amen and amen. What a treat to be here today. I was mentioning to someone earlier that I speak around town to lots of different churches and congregations, everything from a temple to a mosque, a very liberal mosque that allows women to speak. Louder, okay, so I need to do this. I also need to be mindful that when I walk off, I have to put my teacher voice on. Right? And one of the things that I've been dealing with, so when I come here, it's one of the few places I can come where I don't have to worry that what I'm going to say is a little bit political. And someone doesn't say they, politics have no place behind the lectern. So, but I have been troubled, I guess is the right word, with the chaos that seems to be happening in the world. I learned yesterday, I don't know why it came as a surprise, but the war in Ukraine is almost a year old. I was watching a program about the migration patterns in Europe and how many people have been dislocated and how challenging it is for the countries that are taking in some of the Ukrainian refugees to feed them and to care for them. And then in the next segment, they talked about what was going on in Pakistan with some of the challenges, in Iran with some of the challenges for the women over there, the courageous gestures that people are making. And at the border with our immigration. But there was a thread, and I don't know whether or not it's deliberate or it's just coincidental. For me, it's true. Because in almost every one of those instances, one of the threads was women, and women finding escape from the chaos in the ordinary. And so they showed women at the border, and a woman at the border who was from Honduras, and she said, all I want to do is make tortilla for my family. She said, if I can make tortilla for my family, I know they will be okay. They were talking to women in the Ukraine, people who were both there and who had been displaced, and they talked about baking bread. All I need to do is make bread. You know, they were transporting, I don't know, they weren't cinder blocks, but they looked like some handmade bricks. And I guess they had a sort of portable brick oven, and they were using it to make bread. I'm Italian, okay? And I grew up on bread. I don't know, have any of you seen that movie Moonstruck? And there was a bakery in that movie. It was called the Cavalry Bakery. Well, I grew up across the street from that bakery. And woke up most mornings to the smell of baking bread. Because they would start about 3 or 4 o'clock in the morning and they would just bake bread. So that smell has really kind of a patterned response in me. And we have a family tradition that I didn't know was a family tradition until I married, and my husband had our first family dinner with us, and that is, my father was one of 13, 11 boys and 2 girls, and my mother was one of 11. And so I think that for my dad, the pattern came because food was limited. But whenever we sat down to dinner, there was always bread at our table, and my dad never cut bread. He only ever broke bread. And he would give everybody at the table a piece. So he would stand up and break the bread, and everybody, even if you weren't going to eat it, somebody else could eat it, but you got your piece. And then he would take whatever was left and put it in the middle. He did it even when it was just he and my mom at dinner. So, what does that mean? What is it that's so basic to that feeding the soul? You know, they talk about some of our traditions being the bread of life. What does that mean? And there is a quote in the Gospel of Matthew. It's Matthew chapter 13, verse 33, that says, "Heaven's imperial rule is like leaven that a woman took and concealed in 3 measures of flour until it was all leavened. Now, scholars think that this verse from the Gospel of Matthew may be the single most subversive parable in the New Testament. Although it sounds pretty harmless. You know, women breaking bread or baking bread doesn't sound like it's such a big deal. They also believed that the Gospel writer comparing the kingdom of God with a woman making bread is Jesus of Nazareth as the consummate teacher, and yet it is he as the most provocative. So when we think of parables, like, I don't know about you, but for me, the one of like the Good Samaritan is the one that kind of pops to mind first, or the prodigal son. That's the one when I was growing up that we heard over and over again in Sunday school and in church and in Bible study. And that's, we have a tendency to think that that was Jesus as the best teacher. And if any of us learned the parable of the leavened bread in Sunday school, usually it was paired with the idea of the mustard seed. Now maybe you went to Sunday school, got little mustard seed jewelry. I see people nodding. Okay, so some of us got little things you hung around your neck. The boys got stuff they could stick in their pockets. And the message was, out of even the humblest of beginnings and hidden origins, grow big and powerful things. Mustard seeds make big, giant, invasive mustard plants, if those of you don't know. Those of us who live out in the country spend a lot of time trying to harness wild mustard because it spreads so easily. So, like so much of the Gospels, the true meaning of these stories have gotten lost in translation. They've been tamped down. Their political meaning has been emasculated. And whether that's deliberate or it's about time and culture and tradition, well-intentioned editing, I'm not really going to ascribe a motive to it, but it is true. And when it comes to what has been lost in translation, biblical scholars think that this is Exhibit A. So the story of the woman and the leavened bread. And I'm going to give credit for some of my interpretation of this to a man named Dr. Robin Myers. And he is a member of the Jesus Seminar and a pastor of the Mayflower Church, and does phenomenal work in Bible scholarship. So words like leaven and 3 measures are difficult for most of us modern people we can't even handle metric. So it's hard for us to understand. And translators have a hard time trying to figure out what to do about the fact that this woman hid leaven in the dough. So, they typically, in most Bible translations, either have her mixing it in, or kneading it in, or adding to it, but the notion of hidden kind of gets diluted. As for 3 measures, most modern readers would miss the significance of this. 3 measures of flour is about 50 pounds. It's a huge amount of flour. So to the ancient listener, scholars think that the connotation would have been obvious and unmistakable. A first-century Jew would hear echoes of the Genesis story of Abraham. When visitors came, and he provided hospitality, and he directed Sarai at the time, to make ready 3 measures of flour. Knead it and make cakes. So it's sort of a comparison. Because you see, there's more than just a large amount of flour at work here. The whole thing is improbable. Think about one person trying to knead 50 pounds of flour. Okay, so it's out, or it's like at this end of realistic. And not only that, but not to mention the fact that the woman, the main actor in this story, is a woman in a very patriarchal society. You know, there's nothing unusual about women baking bread, but as a symbol of the activity of the divine in daily life, being put in the hands of a woman is radical, it's revolutionary, and for the early Jewish community that was to become Christian was very problematic. Indeed, it probably bordered on being scandalous, because we're saying, here's a woman who in her ordinariness, in her ordinary task of making something from flour, is doing the work of the divine. What's much more, the Greek word for hiding or concealed is encrypto. Encrypto has, in both the Greek and in the Hebrew translations, has a negative connotation. But this is the root word from where we get our word encryption. To keep secret by means of some kind of a code to which you need the key. Right? Talk about encryption codes and encryption keys. Same word, same idea. And the phrase, until it was all leavened, speaks of a process by which leaven, which is yeast, works on dough until everything is corrupted. Think about that. So once set in motion, the activity of yeast is inevitable and it's irresistible. There's no way to stop it. If you put leaven and flour and water together and a little bit of sugar, there's no way you can stop it or reverse it. It's underway. Now, why would these scholars refer to the process as corruption? This is a very cultural context, and I can share something for you out of my own experience. I spent some time over in Japan, and I was with, in my previous life, I was with the University of Houston, and I was there with faculty, and we were out doing things with one night. And we went to dinner, and they served this beautiful fish. You know, everybody eats sort of family style, and they put it on a big round lazy Susan. And so when the fish came to me, I took the last piece, and then to make it ready for the person after me, I just took the chopsticks and I turned over the fish, figuring the person next to me could eat, from the fresh side. Anyway, I never gave it another thought until after it was over, and one of the things I had asked was, if I do something really stupid, could somebody please tell me? Because I promise you it wasn't intentional. And so someone called me to the side and said, did you notice that after you took that last piece of fish, no one ate the fish? And I said, no, I'm sorry I didn't, but why didn't I? And he said, because in Japan, it reminds people of dead fish floating in the water, where the bottom gets eaten out by other things in the water. So on the top it looks really good, and then when you turn it over, it's all corrupted. Then I asked what should I have done, and he said, well, if you feel like you had to do anything, you could have just pulled the spine back, just kind of folded it back, but left it in. So there are things that are cultural that we as modern Westerners are totally out of touch with. And when we make decisions about what we read, whether it's our scriptures, the ones that we are familiar with, or scriptures of other traditions, I invite you to be sensitive to the cultural context in which they were created and in which they live. So that was just sort of this little detour. But so we're back to leavening. In the ancient times, because it was not safe to be critical of the political machinery, people used lots of metaphor when they were writing and talking about the Romans, and it's probably mostly the Romans, I guess. But when I was writing this part, I was thinking about in the World Cup, when the Iranian team first came out, just put their hands over their mouths when it was time to sing them. They didn't do anything. I mean, they didn't say anything. They didn't do anything proactive. They just did this. And it made worldwide headlines. So sometimes in politically sensitive situations, the smallest gesture can have really significant ripple effects. You know, because after all, the Jews didn't celebrate the feast of the leavened bread, right? They celebrated the feast of the unleavened bread. Matzah is not leavened, and it was not leavened because it made it easy to cook on the road if you were running away or you were under siege, because it didn't have to rise. Because leaven makes bread. Leaven is yeast, basically, and it makes bread rise. But the thing about yeast and about leaven is that it also makes bread rot. So matzah, tortilla, don't rot. They get stale, and they might get as hard as cardboard, but they don't rot. So it gives you a sense of the fact that these people were in transition. They were like having to do stuff on a minute's notice. And I make that connection to the people at the border, the women in the Ukraine, the people in Iraq that are in political transition. Bread becomes the kind of thing that if they create it, they could sustain their families with it. They can make it matter. And probably the closest that we can get to the feeling for what the parable talks about in terms of rotting. You know the phrase that says one rotten apple spoils the whole barrel? That's kind of a level of corruption. It gets hidden. That rotten apple could be in the middle of that barrel. But once that rot process starts, the barrel's done for the most part. So leaven was a trigger word in the time of the writing of the Gospels. It was a way to talk about the rottenness of the Roman Empire. So what really sort of seems like a harmless little story is in fact a really dangerous one. Because the parable, understood in its right context, captures the essence of the early church, which says, the Roman Empire is rotten. The way we fix it is we incorporate certain behaviors, ordinary behaviors, into the process, and then we let it take care of itself. See how that works? I'm not having to make any big, giant political statement. I'm not going to have to put my neck out or somebody could come and block it off. But we can do it. We can, as members of congregations, as members of church, just do the ordinary. And think about how we, as part of church communities, can choose to work with and understand people, families in the throes of war, in the throes of migration, and how we might begin to support them. Because look, the truth is, modern churches, Western churches and Western congregations have a real reputation problem. No one thinks of congregations in the West as being threats to the empire. I mean, it's not. Probably the closest that the tradition came to being a threat to the empire maybe was during the Civil Rights Movement, where you had members of religious communities out there on the front lines doing the work, putting their lives at risk, doing the kinds of things that were in your face to the people in political power. So part of our challenge is that we've adapted the announcement of the coming of the kingdom, whatever that means for you as an individual, to our present understanding, instead of understanding it in the lives of people who live in turmoil and in empire and in war and in deprivation and in the need to escape. I mean, I see these pictures from people from Honduras and from Central America, and all these mothers want to do is feed their babies and not worry about them getting killed. And most of the immigrants, it's really interesting, one of the statistics they have is that most of the migrants coming up, so most of the migrants in Ukraine, because in Ukraine the men have stayed behind to fight, and it's the women and children who have moved to other places, either to camps or places out in the country. Same thing is happening in Central America. Most of the migrants that they track are women and children. We have this, I don't know who created the model, that it's about drug dealers and rapists and killers and whatever. They're children. Over 50% of the people sitting at the border trying to get in are under 12 years old. Now, I don't know your background. I'm a child of an immigrant. My parents came to the United States as children. They were very poor. They really didn't know anybody. My grandfather was my paternal grandfather was a longshoreman. My maternal grandfather dug subways with a shovel. I look at those people and I see my family. And I invite you to do the same thing. It's so easy to distance ourselves from the everydayness of what those people are going through. You know, our lives are busy. You know, we get challenged. And so my challenge to you today is figure out how, individually, or maybe as a fellowship community. I don't know if you actually have planned activities that you do community service with. But I invite you to think about it in the framework of this. So think about the framework of the Empire of Rome, the Empire of Caesar, which they always called the Pax Romana, and it was only Pax if you were Romana. But it was peace. It was peace that was built through military victory. It was peace built through conquering people. Imagine that being replaced by an empire of the divine, which is an empire that builds peace through justice. So I'm not sure what, I'm not going to give you an assignment in terms of what activity that you have. But as Texans, we live close to the problem. We have several of them, and this is one that speaks to me. The other one that speaks to me is the human trafficking thing, which, because of the World Cup next year, they think is going to skyrocket in Houston. And, you know, that conduit that comes up 59 from Central America right into downtown Houston is a real problem. So, as you walk through the next couple of months, I invite you to be like some of the first Christians. First, they really aren't Christians, they were just Jews who were going a different way. And prove to the world that the power of love is ultimately greater than the love of power. That the power of love can undo the love of power. And all we can do, like the woman who put the leaven in the flour, is plant the seed and then water it and cultivate it and allow it to happen. You know, any gardeners in here? Any gardeners? Okay. You plant a seed in the dirt, okay? You don't stand over it and say, okay, now come on, grow yourself. I was, for a while, I was the head to school at the Monarch School, and we used to have these vegetable gardens, and it was hard for us to convince the kids to quit pulling up the carrots. Because they had these nice big green tops, and then they pull them up and they were these little stones. And then they put them back in. So no, you can't do that. It doesn't work. You just have to let it take however long it's going to take. Same idea with this. Can't force it. All you can do is the next step. What is mine to do next? What is mine to do today, tomorrow, next year? What is mine to do as an individual, as part of a family, as part of a fellowship? I don't have an answer. I don't know what you'll choose to do. But I do know one thing, and that is what's important is what we do, not what we believe. And some of us sit around and talk about all these things that we believe to be true, and we don't do anything. And so I invite you to be a rebel. I invite you to do one small thing to resolve some of these issues, and know that you will be like that leaven that gets put in that 50 pounds of flour. And what will happen is that ultimately, if enough of us do that, we'll be able to feed everybody at the banquet. And so I say thank you. Wish you a blessed holiday season and a wonderful new year. Namaste.